What up, and welcome back to Throwback Thursday. This week we're doing Season 4, Episode 10, titled Inmates, which originally aired on February 16, 2014. And this is where things go a little bit off, a little bit. The series, I think, is still good until Season 6. But this is when they initiated the non-linear storytelling. This is like a soft launch of it, because in this episode we open up with Beth and Daryl running, and Beth is doing voiceover from her diary, like the first time she started writing in her diary again, saying that they found the prison and what Daddy said this and blah, all this stuff, and they're running away from walkers and everything, and obviously following what the last scene we saw them, they left together the prison. I also do a little retcon here in this episode too, later on, and we're just basically following how many groups is this? 4? I think 4 different groups in this one episode. We follow Beth and Daryl, we follow Maggie, Sasha, and Bob. We follow Glenn and Tara, and we follow Tyreese, Lizzie, Mika, and Judith. So we have 4 different groups, and the beginning is not told directly straight. So we're following, like I said, we follow Beth and Daryl in the beginning. Daryl has given up at night. They start a fire, and Beth is basically saying, like, look, we have to track them. They're not, like, there has to be other survivors. We can't be the only ones. And he doesn't say anything, and she's like, come on, like, you're a tracker, track them. Like, we got to find our people. And he doesn't move or anything. He's like lost hope. And she gets up, she goes, well, I'll do it. And then she starts walking, and he gets up and follows her. It's early in the morning. Then we see that they find some tracks, and they're following it. They see grapes were smashed. And then we see a log. And in the log, I go, is that dead, something dead in there? And I was like, okay. They walked past this. They said that there are people here. They ran. About 12 walkers came. They're probably dead. That's what Daryl keeps saying. And Beth's like, well, it wouldn't kill you to have some faith. And he goes like, well, how did faith work for your father? And then she just looks at him like, she says she thinks that they've had to have made it. She starts to walk away, and a walker attacks her. Daryl runs up. He grabs the walker. The walker's trying to attack him, and then Beth kills him. Then they start walking, and they see the train tracks. This is where a few of us are all going to follow these train tracks. Well, all of us end up on these train tracks, but this is the main point, at least for 2 groups in this episode, at least. And they see these train tracks, and they see a bunch of walkers eating body parts. And Daryl goes and he kills them with his bow and arrow, and he kills all of them. And then we see a little shoe, which I don't know whose shoe that is. I don't know whose shoe that's supposed to be, because it doesn't make any sense. And then Beth has a nervous breakdown, and she starts crying finally, thinking like, oh, one of the kids from the prison got attacked and eaten by a walker. And Daryl just looks at her like, what do you want? So you just see all these bodies of walkers all over there, and then she just stands there like helpless, hopeless, whatever. Then we follow the same, I guess 2 nights prior. We're taking a jump backwards, but this show doesn't tell us this. We just have to figure it out. And we see Tyreese, Mika, Lizzie, and Judith are still alive, and they're at night, and they're trying to keep Judith quiet while she's crying. Mika's nervous. She goes, the walkers are going to find us. Mika's scared of the walkers. Lizzie obviously isn't. We see that Lizzie sees the rabbits inside the tree, and she takes out her knife. She's the one that's killing them, luring walkers. She keeps luring walkers to them. She's a problem. So hopefully that problem is going to get resolved real soon. Then the next day, they're there. They find grapes. They're eating the grapes, and we see that that's the track that Daryl found earlier on. You see? Non-linear storytelling. And then they hear a noise. Mika gets scared. She runs away. She accidentally stabs Tyreese by doing this. He yells at her at one point because she was nervous, and Lizzie's like, Lizzie goes, don't yell at her. She doesn't understand walkers or whatever. And Mika's like, you're the one that doesn't understand walkers. I like Mika a lot. I think she's adorable. I don't know what happens to her. Probably they kill her. Probably Lizzie kills her. But I feel terrible about it. I wish they didn't, because it would have been nice to see. She was a good character. There's a lot of good characters that they let go. And I think this is when Scott Gimple took over, because this half-season point, and he became the showrunner. I think in the beginning it was a different guy who was the showrunner. That's why he did the Infected thing. And I don't think the Infected really worked well with audiences. They liked that episode, but we never, at least that I know of, go back to it. Maybe they do on, later on. But for like the next 4 years, they never went back to it. And I remember having a problem with that and thinking it was a little bit boring, and then things got good. And actually, I think their soft launch of these stories, the way they're doing these stories coming up, was really the the governor, doing a story with him alone and seeing if that could go over, which according to the ratings, it didn't go over that well, but I like those 2 episodes. So then they decided, Scott Gimple decided, okay, let's do this. And they retcon some stuff coming up. So Mika runs away because she hears noise. She accidentally scratches Tyreese. Tyreese goes after her. It was birds, ended up being birds, not walkers. So they find her and they tell her, Mika, like, it's okay. You did good. And then Lizzie says some fucked up shit. Mika says something like, I'm like Sasha. And then Lizzie goes, no, you're not like Sasha, because Sasha's not around anymore. And then Tyreese is just like, and Tyreese tried to take care of Judith, God bless him. We then hear noise of people screaming, so Tyreese wants to go check it out. He tells them to stand back to back and protect themselves, and they hear anything, run towards him. Okay. He goes over and he sees a bunch of people by the train tracks trying to fight off walkers. These are the bodies that Daryl and Beth are going to find earlier on, or they did find earlier on. So, yeah. Tyreese starts helping them, but they're getting bitten and eaten, and their whole crew basically dies. Mika and Lizzie are getting surrounded by walkers. I think Mika shoots, and she's like, Lizzie, and she's so nervous. And Lizzie is trying to shut up Judith from crying and suffocating her. This girl needs to go. Tyreese hears the gunshot, but he turns around. There's a walker there. He beats up the walker, kills him. Then as he turns to go, well, he doesn't turn to go run away. After he kills the walker, he hears someone say, Tyreese, and he turns around and there's Carol. Now, I don't know if it was intentional for her to come back or not. I think that was probably outrage about her leaving the way she did, and they wanted her to come back, so they brought her back instead of leaving her gone from the show. That's just my assumption. I could be wrong, and probably I am wrong. But if you know what really happened, why they brought her back, leave a comment in the comment section down below. I believe she was a popular character and people were pissed off that they did her dirty like that. And I find it interesting, you know, that so Tyreese goes up to her and hugs her, and I was like originally like, oh, she must be racist. First of all, like she doesn't want him to touch her. I was like, oh no, I forgot. Yeah, she killed his girlfriend. So she's like thinking he's gonna attack her because she doesn't know that Rick didn't tell her yet. You see the guy crying as he is looking at the bodies of the people that died, and then they just leave him. They end up following the train tracks, and they find a sign for Terminus. The Terminus storyline that was interesting and ended this episode cool, although it would have been cool if Rick actually cursed in the final episode of season 4. But they ended it cool, and we were looking forward, and then they just do it all the time. They just have to ruin everything, like really like shoot their load way too soon. And that's what they did. I think it was like the first episode. Everything was cool. Oh, they do come back briefly, but they never made serious villains ever. I mean, the governor was like the most serious villain, and like, no, let's not make any real strong villains. Why? And then let's wait for Negan, and then just ruin that whole thing. Because who do we have? We have the Terminus camp that could have been cool. Then after the Terminus cannibal people, then we had the police people with Beth later on. Then we have the wolves that were cool too, that they hop over Alexandria. And then nothing, just short, brief periods, and then that's it. Gone. Waste of time. So Tyreese and Carol are going to head towards Terminus. We then cut to Maggie, Bob, and Sasha's saying like, you know, you're lucky to be alive to Bob, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, we should get supplies, whatever. And Maggie's like, I'm going to find Glenn. I have to go find Glenn. We have to find the bus, basically, because he was on the bus and the bus took off. She wasn't on the bus. She left to look for Beth. Okay. So she thinks that Glenn's on the bus, which he's supposed to be, because that's the last time we saw he was on the bus. Bob decides to follow her because he says we have to be together. They're walking around and Sasha's upset and saying like, you know, we should be looking for this, for food and for shelter, so this way we could survive. And Bob's like, well, what's the point of surviving? What's the point of surviving just to survive? Which is hilarious because the governor was like, that's everything the governor was for. It was surviving. We're surviving to survive. And Bob's like, what's the point of doing that? You know, if you don't have people or anything, what's the point? So I was like, that's interesting. They find the bus and there are walkers all inside the bus. So Maggie's nervous and scared, like that Glenn is dead, obviously in there. And she goes, I have to know if he's in there. So Sasha decides, okay, we'll open the door. So Sasha opens the door and lets one by one the walkers out. And Maggie stabs them all in the head, killing them until she can't control it. They all burst out and they all go crazy. And they're all killing all these walkers that were once their friends. And finally, she looks around and none of the walkers are Glenn. So then she walks inside the bus. she starts walking in, and then they do another fake out where we think Glenn is there. And remember, we think Glenn's on the bus too, because that's the last place we saw him. And then she kills this walker that looks like him, and then she sits down, she starts crying, but they never show the walker's face, and they just show her like crying but laughing. Then we cut to commercial. When we come back, we see that Glenn was left the bus. This is retconning this episode, that he left the bus, and when the tank shot that little crosswalk, where Rick used to see whatever his wife's name was, I forgot her name, Lori. Whenever he would see her, Glenn was like trying to walk through there and explode. I rewind. I looked at that episode again and I rewatched it, and he was nowhere near there. So this is not true. So he's just laying in there, and all these walkers are trying to attack him. He gets up, he screams looking for Maggie. He's like, uh-oh. He walks inside, has to turn on a little lantern he has in the tombs. He's walking through the tombs to make it to his cell block. His cell block's completely empty. He goes to his cell. He lays down in bed like he's going to pass out, and he's just thinking because he's still sick, and then he sees a picture of Maggie, and he decides, no, I got to go find Maggie, which reminded me so terribly, like I remember like this whole, this made me remember, because this episode and coming up, he's looking for Maggie. That when Negan fucking did that to him later on, he tells her, like, I'll find you. Ugh, so heartbreaking. So heartbreaking. They should have never killed Glenn. They teased it too much. They should have just never killed him. They should just had him kill Abraham or someone else. Make it one of the girls. Make him kill Rosita. I don't know what happens with her. She has a baby with the priest. I don't know. Or make her kill Maggie. Well, I wanted it to be Maggie originally. I made a video about that, and I was like, and I had so many thousands of views. And I was like, yeah, it should be Maggie because she's a baby, and make Negan like more of a villain that he killed her with the baby. But I don't know. It's probably awful. Anyway, so Glenn puts on the riot gear. He goes outside. The walkers attack him, but he gets through them. He's running down, and all of a sudden he sees Tara sitting in a cage. And then he stops. He's about to keep going, but he turns around, kills the walkers that are surrounding her, walks inside, takes her gun, sees that she hasn't fired any bullets, and says, you didn't use anything. And then she explains what happened and everything. And she said, the guy just went crazy. We didn't know, I'm a piece of garbage. And she goes, I need your help. She goes, why? Why do you want my help? I'm a terrible person. He goes, I don't need it. I don't want your help. I need it. And he ends up throwing a Molotov cocktail at a car that's parked there to distract the walkers. You would think Tara would go, oh, wow, they're distracted because she doesn't know any of this. She doesn't know shit. Anyway, but he kind of like tells her, I need you to go in front of me. I was like, you got the riot gear. Why is she going in front of you? I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, she does pretty badass gun work. And then she tells him, and when they escape the prison, that Herschel died because he had no idea. Because when Maggie went to go grab him from his cell block, she didn't tell him they killed Herschel. She just said, we got to go. So he discovers that Herschel's dead, and he goes, I have to find Maggie. That's, my wife, and you're going to help me find her. And these walkers come out from the woods. Glenn goes to attack him, and then he passes out because, he's still sick. And then Tara goes to like look at him like, Glenn, get up, Glenn. And then she's like, oh, this walker comes. She grabs his gun, goes crazy on this fucking walker, destroys his head. And all of a sudden, like, she looks and there's a car parked right there in front of them. And she's like, well, nice, thanks for the help, assholes, or whatever. And then you see the doors open and out pops Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene. And they look badass. And they're like, oh, hey, I like your, like, I don't know if he says I like your style or I like the way you, I don't know, something. What else could you do? He tells her. So that ends. And I'm like, oh, cool, interesting. Like, I didn't read the comics at this point. I didn't start reading the comics until after Carl gets shot in the eye in season 5 or 6, I think, or 5. So I didn't watch it till then. I started reading all the comics till then, and I loved the comics. And then when I got to that part and noticed that it was exactly like the comic, I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad I didn't read the comics because I would have been spoiled everything. But anyway, I think I've said all this before. This episode was decent. I don't like the storytelling aspect, the way they did it, but it was a good episode because of the Glenn stuff was cool. The Maggie, that was cool too. She got to kill walkers. Daryl and Beth, I don't care about, and we're going to have a lot of that. And the Lizzie and Judith and Tyreese and Carol storyline, not really care about that either, but that's only because it's a tension to put Carol and Tyreese together to see what happens, and it kind of like dies out like a wet fart or whatever. So I'm not interested in that. But nonetheless, all in all, this was a good episode. I will say that. I like this one better than the last episode. So anyway, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about this episode. This is where Scott Gimple took over and started doing this different storyline time, because we're going to follow now different groups, and we're constantly going to be doing this and never getting back to the storyline we care about. You know, soon, I'm pretty sure, I don't know when it's going to happen, but soon we're going to get to some bullshit and everything about Beth. I'm like, no one cares. We want to get to the good stuff, and we're not going to get, whatever. But it doesn't get that bad until, I guess, you think season 6 is, or this gets terrible. I don't know. All I know is like the peak Walking Dead's maybe a 7. Whatever season. Whenever Negan's actually there, after that cliffhanger, and we see that Negan kills Glenn, that season sucked dick. So anyway, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.